Hey guys, this will be video 12 for the how to design build a 50s era Explorer replica, and sometimes using Stuart McDonald templates, which I will be using them here momentarily to do some route work there in the neck cavity. Haven't done a video in a while, got fairly busy. Had to visit Nashville, spend some time up there with a buddy, getting ready to do some studio work up there, so I wanted to not neglect my personal life and my own stuff. So anyway, did do quite a bit of work to the guitar last weekend and the first of the week. So made some fairly good progress, or actually some really good progress. Very happy with it. So let me just do a little bit of a flyby here, and we'll talk about what I'm going to cover in this video. I'm going to show you the importance of truly slowly working your way to the finish line with the heel, especially on a guitar like this. This has actually been a really humbling project. I knew it was not going to be easy, but everything about this has got to just be really precise. The fitment here, there. In other words, all three sides that are visible, in addition to the fact that the pitch has got to just be positively perfect, so that once the bridge goes in place, that the bridge is not too low or not too high. There's a perfect spot there. And for me, that perfect location after it's all said and done, and the neck is, the relief is set in the neck properly, and the strings are floating perfectly straight and at a perfect height. To me, that magic number is going to be about 11/16 of an inch to the bottom edge of the string. 5/8 is it's okay. It's getting a little bit low, because what will happen if you get too low back here, you'll end up with your neck pickup buried almost below the actual top of the pickup ring. So there's a whole lot of dimensions that are going on, that everything has to come together and work in tandem so that it looks like an authentic, guitar, as well as it feels really good as well. Because if you picked up a 50s era Gretsch, well, then you would want it to feel like a 50s era Gretsch. Or if you picked up a Strat, you expect it to feel a certain way, which is a real low, sleek running guitar. If you pick up this guitar, or the Junior, or the Flying V, or any of that jazz, meaning the flat top versions of their guitars, you expect them to feel a certain way. And that this product is ever so slightly higher off of the top of the guitar than your traditional Strat, Tele, and all that type jazz. Whereas the Gretsch, on the other hand, is considerably higher, because it has the bridge atop a wooden base, and then the fretboard actually has a cantilever, a fretboard. I can't think what they call, because I'm going off the cuff here. The neck continues, and then the fretboard overhang. There's a tremendous amount of material up under here, so everything's very high. So I say all that to say this. You got to hit all of those targets at once in one operation, and if you miss them, you'll either end up with a guitar that doesn't look good, or doesn't feel good, or worse, doesn't play good. But if it looks incredible and it feels incredible, odds are it's going to play incredible as well. So anyway, again, I'll just repeat what I just said. I'll do a bit of a flyby. I got the headstock extremely close to the finished profile. It is ever so slightly smaller, but not considerably, because I did a lot more research, and I began to realize that I think the headstock drawings from Electric Herald, I believe is the website, they're a little bit chintzy. It's a little bit too pointy. So this is a very and when you start getting real small in scale like this is a very narrow profile. Man, a 16th of an inch will make all the difference in the world. So when I went online and looked, I might have to hold this upside down because the way the guitar is. Because when I went online and started looking at these offsets right here. And I've built enough vintage guitars to know that that magic number needs to be about 1/2 of an inch. Okay, in other words, off the edge of the headstock, you need to be about right at 1/2 of an inch. If it's a Gretsch with a real big fat paddle headstock, you could go about 9/16 of an inch to help bring the tuner the tuner shafts into position. So all this stuff is so critical. But these guitars, the Strats and all that jazz, they're about 1/2 inch. He had his drawn at 7/16 of an inch, and what that was doing is it was causing the this thing's so big. I'll try to hold it like this. It was causing these tuners to just really come up way up here, and they look like Mickey Mouse ears. I've already covered this in the last video, but I just wanted to let you know that I really put my ego on the back burner and really did some scale research where I went online and studied some vintage pictures and things like that. And sure enough, yeah, he had missed it. So anyway, this was a little bit tricky. Let me see if I can get this in the camera. This thing's so big, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to. No, I'm not going to be able to. I'm gonna have to hold it like this right here. Let me get behind the camera and look at where I should be. That should be okay right there. I'll try my best to keep this accurate and clear, but nonetheless, this was pretty critical that I got all of this shape work exactly per historical specs. This was kind of a given, and let me just go ahead and cover this. I'm just going to go off the cuff in this whole video, and if I screw up, you know what, to heck with it. I'm just going to keep going. Because I do not want to do this video 3 or 4 times. I personally don't have time for it. I'm so behind on everything else. But nonetheless, basically, after it's all said and done and bolted in place, the end of this tuner right here is very close to that roundover edge. We're talking about a 1/16 of an inch. And if it were my personal guitar, I probably would have made this a little bit wider from this point to that point, but because I was trying to capture the historical specs, you change one thing left, one thing right, the next thing you know, it doesn't look anything like a historical guitar. Okay, so see, that would be the first tuner, that would be the low E, and then this one would be the high E. I doubt I'll be lucky enough to be able to get these in. I don't know. Let's just take some time and see if it works. Try to keep my head out of the camera as well. See how these are just butt to butt or tuner to tuner? Probably once I get all of them in, they'll kind of hold themselves into place. And the magic number between the center to center dimension is 15/16. When you drill these locations, I know those are not straight. I'm looking for a stick. I've got a stick on the other table. It's so frustrating. Hold on one second. I'll try to straighten these up a little bit. There you go. They kind of jump in place once you get them where you want them. Now, I'm not about to turn it over because it'll fall apart. Now, it's not that close because right now it doesn't have the ferrule on the front, so everything is falling down into the bottom right corner because of gravity. But you can see the distance. Man, I need a pointer. Again, I'm not going to stop this video. I'm just going to plow through it. What's critical is when you look at this thing from the front or from the back, that this line here across the top of your headstock, this is any guitar, it needs to split pretty much right in the middle of the shaft. And then that'll give you a real good a visual, but also it'll be functional. Your hands won't be binding when you're trying to do the tuning. So nonetheless, and you see this real estate down here, it's really beautiful because you see just enough material for it to look like an authentic guitar, and then you're close enough here for rock and roll, whereas it's actually going to be about right there, and that'll push everything into place. And then we'll see if we can turn it over a little bit. It's probably going to fall apart, but before it does fall apart, you'll see what I'm talking about. So anyway, let me pause the camera, get organized, and think about how I want to do this video, so I'm not having to pause too much, and then I'll be right back. I'll try not to spend too much more time with this, but this is probably one of the most critical parts of building the headstock and the placement of the tuners. So the rough idea is obviously, you know, if this corner right here were just a 90-degree, it wouldn't be that difficult to calculate. But because see, this corner is not on a 90-degree with the front, it's more so on a 90-degree with the surface of the fretboard surface or the lower. So therefore, whatever distance you have up here, it's going to be less material in the back, and that's where you have to really engineer through the job and just make certain that that you don't look at it from a two-dimensional standpoint and go, oh yeah, I could take off another 1/8 of an inch right here, because by the time you taper that, you'll be behind the overhang. Okay, so we'll stop talking about that, but nonetheless, that's pretty critical. Why? Because that's exactly the way they designed it. They cut it really, really close, and when you're doing a replica, you're having to cut things really close as well, and make assumptions as to dimensions. And what is that that magic number? I basically measured right at 3/4 of an inch. I'd go slightly over 3/4 just to be safe, because you can always come in and sand off material, but you can't add it, especially on a clear coat guitar, and especially a blonde clear coat guitar at that. So what's next? All right, let's go back to headstock, talk about the some of this briefly. Okay, so the footprint is there. That's very much the headstock I want. I'm very happy with all these stain grade, you know, all the clarity of everything. And you might not be able to see it, but I'm 9/16 of an inch thick out here, and then I'm just ever so slightly under 5/8 of an inch back here. And that's typical of Gibson, for them to get a little bit thicker back here, because if it were just near 5/8 of an inch all the way out, you would look at it out there and it would look even thicker. So just, it's kind of that Eiffel Tower concept where I talked about they painted the Eiffel Tower 5 different shades, so that as your eye travels up into looking into the sky, the color looks consistent. So you have to do things like that physically, so that visually things look the same. Okay, so I've spent a ton of time talking about the headstock. The next thing was just assuring that I put this on some sort of jig, and then I machined that access per where the bell cover is going to go. Hit that right on the head. If anything, yeah, I do have the bell up there. If anything, the bell's going to come out a little bit higher. But when I was doing all this drawing and machine work, I was getting it right at the bare minimums. It's actually going to come up higher, because some of this is going to get cut off once the fretboard goes on. Okay, well, the fretboard's not going to come up that high. The fretboard's going to be about right there, and then an ever so small amount of that's going to get shaved off. Okay, I might talk about that stuff later, but that'd be another 20 minutes of conversation if I'm not careful. So let's talk about the heel, because this is probably more important than that first E tuner location. And also, I'll try not to waste any time here, but when you're doing all of this carving, this round over with an actual machine, don't try to go straight to the finish line. you've got to build your heel considerably wider, and I typically have my heel about 7/8 of an inch to 15/16 of an inch from the join line up to the rough finish. Well, I say rough. That's a machined surface right there from a certain thickness here to a certain thickness there. It creates a certain pitch. Okay, so by the time that pitch comes down here and rounds over, if I took that all the way to the target line, I would probably lose my. Well, I say probably. I know for a fact I would lose my flat right here. I don't want to leave that flat, but I would rather have that flat there so that I can come in later and do all my shape work and blend it in by hand, identical to the way they would have done it back in the 50s. And not just, the Gibson Corporation, everyone. That's how everyone was building the guitars. They would fit their heels, and especially like the big body jazz guitars, they'd fit them with a dovetail, and then they'd shape everything in by hand. And that's why the heels would look different from one guitar to the next from the same manufacturer, because it depended on who was behind the sanding block. Okay, but when we're working with machinery, we're trying to get as close to the finished guitar as we can so we don't work ourselves crazy, but also make certain that we leave enough room to blend in properly to the body and not be coming along this point and maybe drop down in a concave fashion. You want to have that beautiful plane right there, which goes from 1 11/16 to 2 3/16. Excuse me. You want that plane to continue to open up and then just flow into the body, which is really beautiful. And this one's perfect. Very happy with it. Still got my flat right there. Still got plenty of flat right there, so that once the fretboard gets installed, let's see, where's the 19th? So that once the fretboard gets installed, see how close I am to the target? I'm within about a 64th of an inch on total. I'm real close to the finished guitar right there. Once it glues together, it's going to be very minimal finish work, fitting the lower or shaping the lower to the fretboard. So, and this is, whoa, almost knocked that glass over. We'll take that in a little bit. Beautiful, really happy with it. Oh, I know what I was talking about, this beautiful transition off the neck, lower to the fretboard into the guitar, and then the flat. That's what I was actually talking about, was that flat. I didn't lose my flat. Okay, you guys know what I'm talking about. Especially if you're still here, you're not here for entertainment. You're here because you're actually building a custom guitar. And keep in mind, I like to talk about that because even though I'm building this particular guitar, all the conceptual things that I'm covering, man, they would be a wealth of information for any of you guys out there that are building your own custom guitar. And when I say custom, I mean anything, because a guitar boils down to a body and a neck, whether that body be solid, chambered, hollow body, you name it, bass guitar, acoustic guitar, you got to fit that neck. And if we're doing a tenon fitment, all of this applies. So anyway, and there is an enormous amount of work doing the tenon, but man, it shows that it's truly in that arena of being able to hit all of those points, that point, that point, that point, the center, the pitch, which is so critical. That's 2 degrees. I was going to go 1 3/4 degree, but it was kind of spooking me. It was getting way too low back here, below 5/8 of an inch, and I didn't want to chance that because of exactly what I covered a little while ago. I didn't want to get this thing all put together and then realize, oh, you know what, the front pickup is below the ring. I hope I covered that a little while ago. If not, I covered it then. All right, pause again, collect myself, figure out what it is I want to talk about, and then we'll go from there. Okay, let's talk about getting the heel exactly where you want it. And typically, if you get it right on paper, you'll be very close, or you'll be ahead of the game, rather than just picking up the guitar and going crazy, beginning to shake. Because typically, if you're not there, and if you had have seen this hill earlier, well, I think maybe you saw it. No, you've never seen it in the guitar, because you have to keep in mind this hill was hanging over uh, this side about a 30-second, and even more on this side. So it was considerably bigger. And then you're having to ask yourself, well, okay, where's first off, where's the true center line? And am I correctly in the body? Which that was all cool. I knew that was all okay. But from a visual standpoint, you got to start working in this direction and asking yourself, okay, how much material is going to need to come off the body right here? And it might spook you, but it was over a 16th of an inch. And that's a lot of material, because you got to make certain that you maintain that beautiful curvature, but don't dare dip down below, this continuing line right here. That's got to continue straight. And as soon as it comes off that point, it's got to start compounding. That ought to be a given. Same thing down here. So I say all that to say this. Uh, I didn't care anything about what the hill looked like down here. All I wanted was to make certain that I got that point perfect and that point perfect. And then, did it matter? Would it have mattered if it was off the center line? No, not at this point. Because let's say you screwed up and you got your neck in. Hypothetically, we'll spend just a minute here. Let's say you got your neck in a 32nd of an inch off the center. Let it go. Just let it go. You should have made certain that you left your body big enough that everything's shapeable, because everything about this guitar, it's impossible to tell. You could have been 3/32 of an inch off center, and you probably would have never picked up on it. Why? Because their original glue line on this guitar was right here. That glue line carried across right here. It didn't matter anyway. This one's perfect, so I'm really happy with that. But nonetheless, uh, it that wasn't a 3 hour job. That was a 2 or 3 day job where I'd spend 4 or 5 hours each night, kind of working my way there. After I got it, glued in and all that jazz, then I started working my way to the finish line, and just verifying that everything about the fitment was staying. This is critically important, especially since you've already done all this machine work. Where I was going with this is, let's say something was funky, and it's not. This one's perfectly straight. It's perfectly on center. It's kind of like a snap type model. It could just be glued together, and I'm perfectly on center here, and I'm perfectly on center down here. But in the event you were off a little bit, there's nothing wrong with either the fretboard moving over to the bass side ever so slightly, or moving down, or just a very small amount. I'm going to exaggerate it, or just a very small amount of kick in order to make everything work. And please understand, read between the lines. I'm not talking I'm not talking an eighth of an inch down here and 3/16 down here to make everything work. If you've got that problem, you screwed up the guitar. But I'm just talking about if everything was going together and you were really fighting this thing, just make sure that it's beautiful and it blends really well, and then you can create your own center line. Okay, and there's nothing wrong with your center line being, uh, a 32nd of an inch off the actual center line, because when you turn the Marshall up to 7, you're not in it, and if it feels good, those things aren't very important anyway. And I hope you guys read between the lines, because I'm not talking about doing shoddy work. But this is what I was talking about, how much the hills can vary. And this is because this one's so much thinner. And these are the initial hills. That one's very close to the finished hill. But even though this one will get cut off once it gets fitted to the body, but this one's very close to the finished body. So you can see how these are identical in their cut. I'm going to put them right there. They're identical in their cut, and then even the curvature, the curve here and the curve here are identical, but you see how much the cross section changes as you get closer to the fretboard versus as you get closer to the back of the body. And all those things, you've just got to be thinking in the back of your mind, okay, what is it I'm building? You know, if you're building a 3-inch thick jazz guitar, you gotta finish that line so that you have a heel there, okay? And what I did was basically just drew the heel, otherwise it'll get real chintzy. Or you don't want to be so panicky that you don't do you start the curvature way up here and then you build the guitar and it's so fat you can't even get your hand around it. So with this right here, where I'm going with this in a very long-winded way, is now that you got the guitar fit perfectly here and everything's beautiful, now it's time to come in with your paper template that you know that you love, and you might look at your template and realize, okay, this one has a tighter radius right here, and this one is a little bit softer radius. Well, you've got to ask yourself, what is this guitar supposed to look like, and or what do I want it to feel like? So I'm going to maintain the historical where it has a fairly tight radius. So I will be carving off, let me see if I can find my pencil. Yeah, I got one right here. I'll just do it freehand. Well, no, I need to show how I use the paper template. That should be on the camera. If not, it's the best I can do. So basically, and also you're verifying this distance here is truly 2 3/16 of an inch. Don't pick one up that's 2 1/4 and then start deceiving yourself or trying to start splitting and overhanging. Make sure it's truly the finished guitar. And then you're just going to want to come in and clean up these lines. And I'm going to pull it off right now and realize that, yeah, that's definitely the heel. And I love it. It's beautiful. I'm going to draw it a little bit darker. But what's next? All handwork. And at this point, what is next? You got to protect this. You do not dare want to let your carving tools get up into here, even a scratch. You scratch that, you're probably in trouble. So you're going to want to come in with a pencil and do some pencil work. I'm going to do a little bit on camera, but I'm not going to try to do the whole thing because I can't risk effing up this guitar. Not because it's this guitar, just any guitar. But I'm taking a considerable amount of material off right here. And basically what I would be doing, let's see if I can get some. Let me just do it. That way you can watch kind of my thought process. Lethal little tool. Woodcraft, miniature rasp. Had this 20 years, never even changed that blade. Keep your finger up there. Don't let it get away from you. You want to really start working that heel off, and then just right now leave a little bit of a hump right there, because right now you got a lot of material to cut off back here. Every bit of this, don't try to start with this just yet, and that's just like some PVC pipe, and that's a 120. There's no sense in starting with this right here because you can't see what you're doing, and you run the risk of burning an indentation right here. This tool, and even this tool, this is a triangle. You want to do some cutting, man, use that thing right there. And I'm keeping a real tight grip on just everything. But this is exactly how I would do it. I would just have it up on the table and be working my way to the finish line. There's no sense in grabbing the pencil and see, I'm not trying to blend this in yet. And I haven't even finished that neck very much purposefully because I knew I was going to have to finish the heel later on. So see, I'm not trying to go down here because what'll happen is you'll get overzealous and you'll lose it, because that is literally within about 5 strokes of sandpaper the finished neck. Check the time. 30 minutes. I'm not trying to do any blending right now. Right now I'm just trying to get the mass off. Or I say trying, I actually am. And you can see within just a matter of a couple of minutes, your little guitar starts to come alive. Be careful, getting too far ahead of yourself. I've still got about 1/8 of an inch to take off right here. So, and because I don't have a good view, I'm slipping a little bit, so I got to be real careful. And at this point, you can kind of start doing your roll blending. But actually, believe it or not, I'm still at a point to where I'm cutting, so I'm going to keep my finger up there and just really. I'd rather cut the tip, not cut it off. I'd rather brush across the tip of my finger and bring blood rather than risk slipping and coming back and tearing something up back here. So keep your finger up there and protect your finger. And by protecting your finger, you're protecting your job. Okay. And then after you get it shaped where you want it, then you come in with this stuff and you start just blending, and you'd be surprised. I'm not going to do it at all, but I'll try it a little bit. Remaining flat on the neck, you can come in like this and kind of begin to work it in and do that blend work. And this is such a rewarding part of the build. It's so enjoyable to get to do this, and you can see how little progress I made. And I didn't misspeak there, but I spent a lot of time sanding there very, very aggressively, and I've still got about another 1/8 of an inch to go in the middle. Pretty close out here. Didn't get anywhere near my primary curve, but nonetheless, you just work your way to the finish line. And I'm going to stop, pause, and decide how I want to end the video, because I don't want it to be too terribly long. But I also realize that I haven't covered any material in about a week, so I want the video series to continue being beneficial for you guys that are actually chiming in or checking in from time to time. So let me pause and I'll be right back. Okay, I spent just a little bit more time doing some more sanding on it, or rasp work, but not much, because keep in mind the heel on this guitar is very, very square. It's amazing. I think they're even in the historical 50s. They might even be a little bit thinner. So I'll shape up to my target. Then I'll study the historical pictures a little bit more, and then I'll make a determination as to, maybe I need to take my get a grip on here. Maybe I need to take my little paper template and start carving on it a little bit rather than that, and then asking myself, what does that look like in relation to the pictures that I'm looking at online? And then it's a lot easier to lose that template than it is to start guessing and trying to take it from this distance down 3/16 of an inch and realize, oh man, I really lost everything. Not being melodramatic, but I've done it before, and it hurts when you know that you had a beautiful part of a guitar and then you lost it because you were trying to achieve something else, or you got overzealous about fitting this in so much right here that you didn't realize that you were cutting a concave. And I've done that before. We're talking 20 years ago when I was first started building guitars, and it's amazing. You'll be back here working and realizing, oh wow, everything's beautiful, only to realize that you lost that pitch. And that's why I wanted to spend so much time talking about the trapezoidal path is what I'm talking about. PATH. It's more narrowed down here than it is up here, which we all know that. And when you look at that, you really look at that in a dimensional fashion, and you realize, wow, man, that thing really spreads out. And if you don't let the guitar spread out with it, um, it'll show. Even the untrained eye will see it. So let's. I'll stop talking about the heel now, but the heel and the head start are incredibly critical. And like I said, it was really important that I got that blended so that it looked like an authentic guitar, but also got to protect these corners. Also, that when you're truly playing and you're doing your work, if you're doing some sort of real heavy jazz work and you're moving some chords down there, sometimes when I'm doing bar chord, or when any of us are doing bar chord work, we'll slide all the way down here and we'll just let our index finger float in an artificial location for the bar, which we all know that as players. So what does that mean? You don't want to be crashing into anything, and you want it to feel free all the way up, just as free as any guitar, Strat, Tele, Les Paul, blah 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 blah. And that's difficult when this is the first time you've ever built this guitar, making certain that you don't carry that cutout too far up, and then you lose the visual, but that you do cut it enough so that it feels like a really fine playing guitar. Okay. And all of that's just natural. So the next thing would be, let me check the time. 36 minutes. It's going to be a pretty long video, but nonetheless, there's a lot to talk about. I might pause the video in a little while and drill that out and go ahead and run the router because I'm set up to do it. But don't hold me to it because right now I just want to talk about the general job. But where I left off in the last video, obviously the neck had not even been glued in yet, but I did get that epoxied in. And I failed to mention that when I epoxied that in, I had like a real long string, and in the middle of that string, I had a small cotton cloth, and I had it saturated with lacquer thinner, not wet, but extremely moist, so that when I did put these in, I was able to pull that piece of cloth back and forth in the event if there was any bit of glue in there or epoxy in there that started running down, it wouldn't either become a blockage for certain areas, or worse, it wouldn't break loose and be in there rattling. And after I did glue all that in, because the epoxy has a tendency to start creeping, I flipped the guitar over like this so that any epoxy that might have been in there is just going to settle in those corners. Okay, so just think about I call it gravity and glue. Be thinking about, those things like that, and you'll be fine. And in the last video, I had mentioned I was very, very anxious to get some sealer on this. And this is, I think, 3 coats of nitrocellulose lacquer. Got a little bug in here. 3 coats of nitrocellulose lacquer. So it really shows the beauty of the guitar. I'll have to flip it upside down because of the angle. And let me get that cloth off the corner. Very beautiful. That's a very rare body. If you specify this from a custom builder, the first email they're probably going to send you is, where in the, am I even going to find a piece of flamed Limba Korina that's basically pure 100% quarter sawn? That's beautiful. That's very rare. And you begin to see it show up as you start putting the clear on it. It's insane. This is one of the most beautiful solid body guitars I've ever built. So it's not guitar worship. We don't worship them, but it's just nice to be able to take something that God himself created in nature and put tool to it, and put heart to it, and bring it to life, and then plug it into a Marshall, play some rock and roll. So anyway, it's all cool. And it's a beautiful guitar. It's not a guitar that I would want to play every day, but man, it feels good. It's not just a pretty face. It truly is extremely well balanced. And when you put that baby on your knee, I know there's not a fretboard on it right now, but when you put that guitar on your knee, she feels really well balanced. I know that by the time you get the tuners on there, the fretboard on there, the frets in, and then you load it with the pickups, she's going to be about an 8 pound, 8 to 8.5 pound guitar, and it's going to be a tone monster because the tonal, they're not really there yet, but the tonal aspects are pretty amazing. It's a beautiful, beautiful sound. Anyway, all right, let me check the time again, see what I might need to talk about, and I'll try to end the video after this. 40 minutes. Let me pause and think about how I do want to end this video. I make certain that I've covered enough because everything that we've done is in preparation to glue the fretboard down. That's where I'm going with this. Okay, should be able to finish the video here fairly soon. As mentioned before I paused, everything that we've done thus far was so that we could move into the stage of installing the fretboard. And then every decision that you've made throughout the job obviously should have always had the fretboard in the back of your mind, whether it was going to be an unbound fretboard or whether it was going to be a fretboard with a ton of binding on it, because the more binding, then the more narrow the initial machine work is for the fretboard, because just because of dimensions. But nonetheless, the scale doesn't change and the trapezoidal path wouldn't change, because if you made it 1/8 of an inch more narrow down here, well, then it should be 1/8 of an inch more narrow up here if you were putting, all the binding on there, meaning that you would have a 1/16 of an inch of binding on the treble side and a 1/16 of an inch of binding on the bass side. But with this design, we're working with an unbound design, which some people think, oh, then that's really easy. Not necessarily. You'd be surprised. A lot of times, binding will conceal a multitude of sins. So keep it in mind that if something was funky with this edge right here, well, it's going to show, because that's more or less what you're looking at right there. That's the finished guitar. It might not be perfect, but it's very close. And even though that's going to get rounded over a little bit, everything that you see going on right there, that's going to be the finished guitar. And I'm glad I went off the cuff talking about that, because one thing I failed to talk about earlier with the seal work, I like using a nitrocellulose lacquer, just clear. Maybe cut just a little bit, but not much, because if you cut your nitrocellulose lacquer too much, man, this end grain is just going to be like a sponge, and it's just going to just travel. It's going to be gone. So I'm not saying be thick, but just come right out. Just come right out of the can. The consistency in the can, and brush it. Every bit of this was done with a brush. We're talking like a 99-cent chip brush, and if a hair comes out, it's not a big deal. Just reach down and get it out of your work. But the way I did do that, keep in mind this was done before the neck was put in. And I failed to mention that earlier. Let me digress a little bit. This is critically important. Everything that I did up here and talked about doing, and when I say everything, I mean everything. Every bit of that was done before it ever got glued into the body. Okay, so no point in talking about that anymore. But it may be a little bit deceptive, because you might be thinking, well, wait a minute. When should you carve that? I have a jig built that will hold my neck and not damage it, and I can do everything on the jig. There's nothing wrong with going ahead and gluing this in and doing all that work on here, because you might actually use the body to put on a table and clamp down in order to hold that in a certain location while you're up here doing your work. But I have found that everything that you're doing with this headstock, you need to be able to flip this thing on all axes in order to manipulate the job, and you don't want the body swinging around like a wild cannon, because you'll tear the thing up, you'll damage it. So I did all that stain work, the sealer work, and then put it to the side. And one thing I had failed to mention in the last video when I made this statement was like, don't sand too much, don't try to get overzealous. What I failed to mention was save all of your sand work right up to the point to where you've got your nitrocellulose lacquer out and your brush clean, and there was you never did any color work with this ever, meaning you never painted a black guitar, and that might show some discoloration. That's just from the nothing. It's nothing. It's just old bristle. It's a black bristle as well. But because this nitrocellulose lacquer will cause any color in there to I'm not sure what the word would be, just come back to life, and it'll start bleeding into your nitro. And next thing you know, you'll be thinking, oh, what are these black streaks in my guitar? And are these red streaks or these hot pink streaks? Well, it's the material bleeding out of your brush. So when you do all of this clear coat, you've got to make certain that you're sealing the edges first. And then I did one coat on just the edges. This is pretty important. And then I have this little piece of foam sitting right there. I cleared just the edges, and if a little bit of material rolled over on the top, I kind of wiped it off a little bit. But I knew that the end grains was going to soak up an enormous amount of the lacquer, but once I got up here on the top and or on the back, it was going to seal fairly quickly. So I did one nice coat all the way around the perimeter, let it sit for a few minutes. Then I did another coat, and I mean, don't let it sit for very long because you want this to stay moist. And then I think I might have even done 3 coats within about 15 minutes on just the sides. Then I was ready to do the back, and the side was pretty much already dry by then because this stuff dries so fast. And then I simply came in with the clear and just made certain that I kept it wet and worked it very quickly. Where I'm going with this, keep it clear. Don't be tempted to do any tint work at all. Because, and when I say no tint work, zilch, zero. Do not put any tint in here at all. Save that for the very end of the job where you're doing your spray work, or either you've taken it to a professional guitar builder and they've put it in their explosion proof nitro booth and their paint booth, and they're spraying it. They're spraying it with a little bit of amber or a little bit of vintage vibe, But to do that stuff on the front end would not allow you to come in here and level and blend all of this work without having a patch quilt later on. Because if you had have tinted that a little bit and then you started trying to now seal this, well, it's going to be two-tone, and you're always going to be playing catch up trying to get it right, and you're not ever going to get it right. So don't ever tint your lacquer. Always work clear. I'm talking do 10, 15, 17, 18 coats, all clear, non-tinted, you name it. And that'll guarantee you that once you build this guitar and you realize, oh man, the neck is just way too thick, or it's way too round, or it's way too left, or way too right, well, you can come in and you can sand off 17 coats of nitro, and then you can sand off a 1/16 of an inch off the whole neck, and then come back in here with a brush and do 5 or 6 coats of clear nitro, and then sand and blend all that in, and then shoot your clear nitro again, and no one will ever know that you completely renovated the guitar. Okay, so always work with clear nitro. And I know the video is getting long, but that was one of the hardest things I ever overcame when I was a young builder. And I wasn't young in age, but I was a new builder, I should say, because I was so tempted to start experimenting with the ambers and or the vintage vibe colors, and man, they got me in a world of trouble. because typically what happened was the guitars ended up just being deep cowboy orange red, and I could never get them under control. They just got way too dark. So resist the urge to go too vintage, because that's exactly what you'll get. It'll look like a leather, and you don't want that. So let me check this out. 50 minutes. I haven't done an hour-long video in a long time. We might shoot for a record here. Let me think, what else should I talk about? I don't know if I covered it enough, but everything that we've done up to this point was to get to the point to where, I've already talked about this, that you're, preparing to glue the fretboard down. But it was critically important that I really drove home the importance of the seal work. Also because you don't want this raw wood sitting too long. You want to get it sealed within a respectable amount of time. And the worst thing that you could do is, if you start a project like this, is to not finish it and box it up and think that you're going to come back next spring and not have some potential problems where this wood might have taken on too much moisture or something. So just proceed with caution and build your guitar. If you're not going to build the guitar, seal it, box it up, do whatever you need to do, but keep it in a climate-controlled environment. But everything that we're doing at this point is moving in the direction where once we glue this fretboard on, we're so close to the finished guitar that it'll come together almost terrifyingly fast. So, and that's pretty much where we are right now. This guitar, believe it or not, is very close to being finished, because after this, it's just the frets. And then all of that stuff will just be fastened in. And before you know it, I'll be stringing it up just to do the general setup and the fit work. So anyway, it's exciting when you know how close you are, even though it still looks like, a project guitar. It's very close. So I'll end the video right there. I'll try to turn around so maybe it has some vintage appeal, or it looks like a you know what, and it does. It looks almost identical. And again, I'm not being dramatic about that wood. That's a very rare wood. It's hard to find. It's easy to find Limba. It's easy to find Korina, which is what we call it in the States, but it's very difficult to find the blonde. And see, that's just clear. That's just clear coat. And it's already got this beautiful blonde, and you can see a little bit of the figure coming alive in the guitar when I move it around. I say you can. I know I can. It might not be showing up on the camera, but man, it's got some beautiful, just unbelievable ripple. And the ripple is kind of going on this angle right here, so everything's consistent. As I had mentioned in the early videos, when I did all of my layout and original glue up, I made certain that this board right here didn't get turned 180 degrees that way or 180 degrees the other way, or worse, I don't know what else. You really could only be two different options. But she's really beautiful, and that's a rare wood with all that figure, perfectly quarter sawn, and then light as a feather. It's just amazing. I won't weigh it because we're getting so long in the video, but so I'm doting a little bit, but nonetheless, exceptional supplier for the wood. And I forgot the guy's name. He's out in Seattle, I believe, but super nice guy. I'll try. I mentioned it in one of the early videos. Someone had asked who had furnished the wood, and the guy that did furnish the wood, he furnishes wood to luthiers building extremely high-end guitars, and the stuff was not cheap. But when you see how much time you spent labor-wise, you realize, oh wow, it would have been justifiable to have spent $1,000 on the wood if you got it to look like that right there. Okay, so anyway, I'll end the video right there. Appreciate you guys checking in. Next video, it may be tomorrow. I'm not sure. I got a lot going on this weekend, but if not, probably the next video, the fretboard will be glued on there, and there may even be some frets in there as well. So she'll come together fairly quickly. So thanks for checking in, and I'll see you in the next video.